Hello and welcome to the MBOM podcast, where you'll learn to master the business of yoga. MBOM is a proud part of the Wander Barn Podcast Network, and I'm your host, Amanda Kingsmith. I'm a 500-hour registered yoga teacher, a yoga business coach, and a total business geek. Here at MBOM, you'll learn everything you need to know to create a sustainable yoga business by learning from myself and guests from around the world about how they built their yoga businesses, and about how you too can become a successful yoga teacher, studio owner, and much more. All right, let's dive in. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Mastering the Business of Yoga. I am super excited that you're joining me today for the podcast. I have a super awesome interview for you today, and I'm really excited about this episode. I am chatting with Ashley Sondergaard, and her and I have been kind of in the same realm, in the same world for a while now. And it was really cool because earlier this week, actually, we got to connect for her show. I was a guest on that. So that episode will be out at some point later in the future. And I'm really excited to have her on the show today. She is a self-care coach, yoga teacher, astrologer, and host of the Yoga Magic podcast. For over 10 years, she studied yoga, meditation, astrology, and mindfulness practices that prioritize self-care and self-discovery. After having her two girls, Ashley discovered the hard way that taking care of yourself first is the only way to take care of others. So today she supports her students and clients in up-leveling their everyday routines into magical self-care rituals. And today on the show, I'm really excited because we're going to be diving into all things astrology, maybe some self-care too, because I think that would be pretty awesome. And just talk in general about how you can use astrology to help you get to know yourself and in turn help you with your yoga business. So very excited to dive into this, and let's get to it. Ashley, welcome to the podcast today.
Oh my gosh. Thanks, Amanda. I'm so excited to chat. Yeah, we have been. We're in the yoga club of the world together, and now we get to connect on this. So this is fun.
Yeah. It's been so fun connecting with you, and I'm sure we're going to have more and more connecting time in the future where we can just chat and get to know each other more. But can you start by just sharing where you're joining us from today?
Yes, I am in a suburb of Minneapolis, Minnesota. It is today, kind of dreary, but Minnesota is this like weird place that for the most of the year is pretty ridiculously cold, but we're in that part now where I'm like, I love it here. I'm going to be outside all the time. And so you're catching me at a really great moment. If we record in January, it might be different.
I hear you. I'm Canadian. I feel like you're basically Canadian when you live in Minnesota.
Yeah, basically. Yep. That's true.
Amazing. Well, I'm glad that it's warm right now. As a Canadian, I always feel that in my bones. It's like, spring is here, sun is out, time to spend all of our time outside. Definitely. And so can you start by sharing a little bit about your journey with yoga, how you first got into yoga, all of that good stuff?
Yeah, definitely. So I started practicing just out of college about 15 years ago, and really came to it for the physical practices. One of the first yoga classes that I ever took was a yoga sculpt class. So it was like weights and like loud music. And it was like, I think it was all Britney Spears themed. And I was like, this is amazing. I loved it so much. And you know what? I know now, like that's not really the truest form of yoga, but it was great because it got me in the door and it got me to move my body in a different way. And as I continued to practice, I started to realize, wow, like there's a lot to this experience, right? There's so much here that is helping me understand what I want in my life, what choices I want to make and build confidence. And as I started to study the philosophy and, the 8 limbs and really dive into what I say, capital Y yoga, it liberated me in so many ways. And so the physical asana was less important and all the other pieces became more and more critical. And eventually I decided to teach and share because I loved it so much. And I also was a theater kid. I think a lot of yoga teachers tend to be like that, where we were in front of people in our past. And it feels kind of good to be like, yeah, I'm here with you guys, like in front of people again. I started teaching. And I left a full-time events fundraising career to teach yoga full time. And it was so much fun. I really loved it. I worked for Core Power Yoga for almost 10 years after that. So now I have sort of pivoted into my own work and adding in new layers to it. I think what's so cool about yoga is that, again, you get these like initial steps into a studio. Those first classes can go so many different directions. And it really gave me the permission to do that.
Cool. Yeah, that's awesome. And so can you tell me and listeners like kind of the different components of your business now? Like what are the different things that you're working on now that you're working for yourself?
Yeah. So when I went off on my own, the original vision, and I think for those listeners that are in this, know that sometimes you have to pivot, you have to make changes as you figure things out. The first iteration of my solo teaching journey was that I was going to do all bachelorettes and like wedding parties. Like it was called Wedded Wellness. And I was teaching yoga for basically like special events for weddings. And it was super fun. And it started slow, but it was starting to pick up. But I realized pretty quick that I'm like, I don't really have any real attachment to like weddings or that part of the world. It was something that I'm like, okay, well, good try. Let's try something a little bit different. And so when COVID happened, I learned, wow, like I can do a lot of things online. I'd already started my podcast and I was just like, okay, this is a whole new audience. It's a global audience, right? And I had at the time gotten really into astrology and learning a lot about myself through astrology. So I started theming classes around what was happening in the cosmos. I was talking about how to take care of yourself as it relates to your birth chart. And then from there, it started to really pick up. I formally started studying astrology and combined the practice and the ideas of yoga with astrology to get really, really specific into how to take care of myself and other people. And so what I now call cosmic self-care is really the heart of my business. So I do still teach, well, not currently at the moment because I'm 700 years pregnant, but when I'm done, when I'm done with this baby, I will go back to teaching. But a lot of what I do is health and wellness coaching with astrology as sort of the guide. Again, the birth chart as the guide to what is it that actually works for you. And it's been so much fun. And there's been so many wild opportunities that have come along.
Cool. Yeah, that's so awesome to hear. And I just feel like that's such an interesting pivot to go towards. And one of the things I want to ask about before we get into like the astrology stuff on a deeper level is like just about kind of trusting that intuition on pivoting. Because I think that this is something that a lot of people kind of go through and can be kind of a bit of a struggle. Like it's like, okay, I'm doing this thing that I like weddings are cool, bachelorette parties are cool. I'm sure you were probably like great at leading those classes. It's like, okay, I'm doing it. It's going well. How do you kind of know when it's time to pivot and then like trust that intuition to make a change? Because sometimes it's scary because it means like giving up clients and giving up pay and, trusting that other stuff is going to come in.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I mean, this whole dance of intuition and manifestation, essentially like wanting, having a vision of something you want and taking the right steps forward. It's tough. It's really tough. And I dance with it all the time, even now. What I do find is that when I listen to that intuition, and for me, and really for everyone, intuition will come in really neutral. That like hit of information is going to say, this isn't serving you anymore, right? It's neutral. It's not overly dramatic. And there's not fear attached to it. It just is. And so when I get those intuitive hits as it relates to my business and just life in general, I pause with it for just a moment to understand like, okay, cool. Is this coming in like that neutral space? And then I take action as it seems necessary. And in my practice and in the work that I've done with manifestation and with working with intuition is that the minute that I do follow that intuition, there is sort of some sort of validation sign that comes in. And I recognize those and I stop and celebrate those wins. So I'll even just use an example of like during COVID, it's like, oh, all of a sudden I'm pivoting to online. I hadn't been teaching online yoga. That was not something I was really excited about. However, right early on, making that pivot and then deciding to add in this layer of astrology, I had applied for some sort of like relief grant. And I think not the minute, maybe like the day after, I really started to kind of carve out this cosmic self care vision of what I wanted to do. This big grant came in, and I'm like, okay, this is a sign that I'm on the right step. So I think it's getting really clear about how your intuition comes to you, in what form, and then celebrating those wins, big or small. It could be a new client, it could be a big grant, it could be so many different things.
Cool. Yeah. Thank you for that. That's super awesome. And I want to dive into just everything astrology. So maybe we can start with the cosmic self-care piece, since this is something that like you really specialize in. Like, how can we use what's happening in the cosmos? How can we use our own birth chart to start to look at like taking care of ourselves?
Yeah, it is my favorite topic. And it's something that I think once you start to realize, it's just astrology is such a mirror. It's such validation of who you are. So let's talk about the birth chart first, because the birth chart is your birth chart is a snapshot of the sky the minute that you were born, and it never changes. So when you know your birth date, location, and time, you can pull your birth chart for free anywhere online. Lots of websites for that. But once you know your birth chart, you can start to get really comfortable with a few placements to again understand who you are. And I like to work with a few different placements. I like to work with the sun, the moon, and Mars. And let me just kind of break down what those are and how those show up in your chart. So your sun is what you would look up in like a horoscope, right? You're most familiar with your sun. And the sun is a big part of your chart. It's very important, but it's not everything. There's a lot more to the chart. And that's why when we have that fuller picture of, where the moon was, where Mars was, all these other things, it's a lot better descriptor of who you are at your truest soul essence, right? And the sun is where we look to see, where are you drawing energy? How can you energize yourself? And as it relates to self-care, these are going to be literally fuel practices, right? Whether that be movement or nourishment or, how much time you spend outside. The sun is going to tell you again how you energize. Do you know what your sun is, Amanda? Well, obviously.
Yeah, I'm Aquarius.
Oh, yes. Okay. So Aquarius in the sun is really energized by learning new things, by really helping humanity. Aquarius is one of those signs that wants to make the world a better place. And so volunteer work, even in the work that you do, helping yoga teachers, like that is energizing. It's energizing to go and serve others. What isn't super energizing for an Aquarius sun is to be around a ton of people. There's definitely the element of like having to recharge alone or with a smaller group. Aquarius is really good at that. But then again, is so interested in serving the world. So that's just an example. Aquarius is an air sign. So that often has a lot to do with learning and intellect. I'm a Cancer sun. So I tend to energize through nurturing, whether that's like making healthy food for my family or even like nurturing myself, taking a bath. Like that's really energizing for me. I know this about myself. Not energizing, doing like a super hard workout. That doesn't feel good in my body. So again, just understanding like your exchange with energy and how you fuel yourself is where we look to the sun. The moon is, again, where the moon was when you were born, what sign it was in. The moon is your subconscious. It's your inner child. It's if the sun is who you are in the light and you're energized and you're bright and shiny, the moon is who you are in the dark. This is that deeper layer. And, when we do so much self-study in yoga, this is one of those really cool places to see like, okay, what flavor, what costume is my moon wearing? What can I look to understand about my subconscious? Because we know that subconscious is a large part of our thoughts, but we don't recognize them at all. We don't even know anything about them. So this is more of those like self-study practices, things like meditation, things like shadow work. Things like understanding, your how you like to journal and process grief and process emotions. Do you know your moon?
Yeah, it's Gemini.
Okay. You got a lot of air. I love this.
I'm all air.
All the air signs. So Gemini in the moon really, again, this is where you feel safe, where you get to do some of this tough work. Gemini feels really safe um, studying and gathering different ideas, right? So whether that be like learning, like in your case, like learning about different yoga philosophies, different ideas, pulling it all together. And it's very much like a yes and yes, understanding all these different ideas, being open minded, like that feels really safe. And it's a matter of processing it too, right? Like perhaps it feels really good and rejuvenating to read a book and then take some time to sit with it and journal on it and ask yourself, like, what did I gather from this? Another great practice, like with Gemini in that moon space, is a really sweet book club where like you're with friends that if you were to say something just bizarro, they wouldn't even flinch, right? It's like you can just be yourself and you can geek out on some sort of topic. So the moon again is that like a little deeper layer, less of those kind of stereotypical self-care practices, but more about getting to know yourself. And then the final piece of the birth chart that I like to work with is Mars. And Mars is motivation. So when you understand your Mars, one, will actually get your butt off the chair to do the practice, whatever that is. And then two, what are your triggers? What are the things that kind of like fire you up so that you actually, where you need self-care? It can go on both ways. It's sort of that like, being motivated enough to be ahead of the game, but also in those moments of like, I'm really frustrated, understanding what you can go to there. Do you happen to know your Mars?
I don't know my Mars. Do you have a website that you recommend? I can look it up.
Yeah,
maybe you can share what yours is and I'll look up what mine is in the meantime.
For listeners that are wanting to look up their birth chart, my favorite website is the astrologer Chani Nicholas. I think she's actually Canadian now that I'm thinking about it, Amanda. I don't know. But ChaniNicholas.com, and you can pull up your chart there. And I like hers because it's really, it's simple, but it's also like it pulls out the things that you're going to want to use. She also has an app called Chani. It's really helpful. So if you pull your birth chart again, you do need to have your exact birth date, time, and location. As close as you can get to if you have to get your birth certificate or ask your parents, because that will help tell you exactly, your houses. It's going to give you the most individualized snapshot of who you are. So my Mars is in Capricorn, and Mars in Capricorn is this sort of like extra oomph of action, if you will. Capricorn loves to succeed. So I'm motivated by checking things off the list. If I have a self-care checklist, I like nothing feels better than just boom, hitting it. Yes, I did it. I got it off. There's that motivation of feeling successful, of seeing results there in Capricorn, and really having, seeing that, okay, this effort that I'm putting in is bringing me some rewards. I'm actually gaining something from it. So yeah, Mars is a great place to look at both your motivation style and your triggers. So how Mars and Capricorn can show up as far as triggers go is more around like, I'm not using my time wisely. I'm like not being productive enough. I need to do something. And so having an understanding like, okay, that's how I'm often triggered in that way. It helps me to remind myself that like rest is productive. Rest is very productive. So yeah, just an example of how Mars can show up.
Okay, cool. That's awesome. So mine is in Taurus.
Ooh, okay. Yeah. Another earth sign. So you're motivated by really that like luxury, like night, like quality parts of life, whether that be like good food or like luxurious experiences or a soft robe. So how you can apply this as it relates to self-care is to potentially have like a space where you do your practices, have your yoga space, have your slippers next to your bed, next to your meditation pillow, so that when you wake up in the morning, you can slip those on, you know where to go, and you just hit up your practices. That's really creating that sort of like luxurious experience. Taurus is very grounded, is very earthly, is very grateful for the finer things in life. They really enjoy that. And so when you have that teed up, you're so much more motivated to actually take action. Does that sound like you?
Yeah, especially talking about like those routines and stuff like that. Like I like to like even when I'm traveling a lot, it's like I like to like put out my yoga mat with my like little massage balls that I use. So I've got like my space in the mornings to do my like morning stretching and stuff. And I feel like that's always something where like we just moved houses, for example, like a month ago. And it was like, I'm kind of like playing with like where my space is going to be. And I feel like I finally found like, okay, this is the space I want to use.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's, it takes some time and investment to like build what it is that you feel that feels really good. But once you're there, it's like, oh yeah, this is really nice. And I want to keep coming back to that. Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah. Yeah. It's nice to know that there's some earth in my chart as well.
Keep
Since
your
I've got,
air grounded. Oh yeah.
yeah,
Oh
because
yeah.
I'm like Aquarius and then my rising is also Gemini. So there's like lots of air in
You're
there.
very Mercurian. Yeah, mercurial. You're very, yeah, that's awesome. That's great though for learning new things and being a teacher, which you are. It's amazing.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. It's always cool to hear like with birth charts, like what resonates. And it's like, oh yeah, I am like that. And that is things that I do and stuff like that. And I know for me, I always felt like horoscopes in the newspaper, like a Cosmo magazine are always like kind of fun to read, but they always just feel so generic. And I feel
Mm-hmm.
like I was always like, I don't really like resonate with things that are like being said about Aquarius. But it was once I got my whole chart read that I was like, oh, okay, this feels a lot more like me than just this like generic one liner about like what Aquarius is doing this month.
It's true. It's true. And I think that's where people will easily write off astrology is like you read your sun sign, which again is like it's like a month swath. It doesn't really have, it's not, that personal. It's helpful again to understand that energy source, but when you put it all together, when you put the whole birth chart together, it's a big puzzle. And what's actually, more helpful if people are starting to dive into this a little bit more, instead of reading your sun sign horoscope, read your rising sign horoscope because your rising sign is actually the most personalized part of the chart because the rising sign changes every few minutes. And
Mhm.
so, again, that's going to be the most personalized part. And what you can do and what a horoscope is essentially doing is taking what's happening in the cosmos right now, right? Whether it be like Jupiter just moved into Aries and talking about how that's impacting your birth chart, which doesn't change, which is static, but how it's lining up against your birth chart and what parts of your life are being activated by something like Jupiter in Aries. Jupiter is the planet of more, of luck, abundance, all the things. And when it's in the sign of Aries, which is the sign of action and taking the first step, there's a lot of urgency and a lot of excitement. And so you can see, okay, where is this hitting my chart? What particular house is this hitting in my chart? So you see, okay, where is Aries in my chart? Oh, it's in my second house. What second house? Second house is money. You can Google all these things. It's pretty easy once you get the hang of it. But all you need to really have is just that birth chart, that static birth chart. But I agree, it does help to have it read to you once, at least once. That
Yeah.
first time, be like, here's all the things. And then you can go crazy. It's so fun.
Yeah, for sure. I feel like just, for me, I feel like I've just kind of started to dabble with this. Like for most of my life, I was just kind of looking at like, yeah, Aquarius. And then somebody read my chart a couple of years ago. And now I can look a little bit deeper. But I think it's like I mostly understand like sun, moon, rising. And then when we get into like the houses and all the other planets, I'm like, oh, okay, I don't know what any of this means.
Yeah. Yeah. You're not alone. It can get definitely overwhelming. If you know those big three, that's like one of the best places to start, especially as it relates to self care. If you throw in Mars in there, get a little motivation, you're doing great.
As a busy yoga teacher, brand new mom, and entrepreneur, I am always looking for ways to increase my productivity. And that's why I'm really excited about Magic Mind. Magic Mind is the world's first productivity drink that not only gives you the alertness that coffee and other energy drinks do, but also has ingredients to support memory, increase creativity, and boost focus. It also has all natural ingredients, which is something that I really love about this brand. These ingredients include ceremonial grade matcha and lion's mane mushrooms to extend your morning energy, as well as turmeric, ashwagandha, vitamin C, echinacea, and much more. It helps with procrastination and brain fog, but doesn't give me the jitters and crashes the way that coffee does. That's why I love to start my day with Magic Mind. My favorite way to make it is to heat up and frost the milk and make a little matcha latte. If you followed me for a while, you know I love a matcha latte in the morning. And if you're like me and need to get a lot of things done in the shortest amount of time, go to magicmind.co/yoga and use discount code YOGA to get 20% off today. Magic Mind is your best choice when it comes to getting more done in less time through the power of the nootropics inside. Plus, they also have a money-back guarantee for any first purchase will be refunded, no questions asked if it doesn't meet your expectations. I'm sure you're going to love it. So head on over to magicmind.co/yoga and use my discount code YOGA at the checkout to get 20% off your first order. All right, now back to the episode. And so obviously self-care is like a huge piece of a business, like being a yoga teacher and running a yoga business. I think that self-care is like a really, key piece to how we operate as business owners. So this is super helpful, but I'm wondering if we can dive into a little bit more like how we can use our charts to kind of make decisions in our businesses or decide what we want to do in our businesses. Because I feel like for me, like understanding myself and who I am, I feel like sometimes gives me permission to kind of go that direction, which not that we need that permission, but I feel like there's so many external inputs on us or outputs on us all the time that I feel like sometimes it's just like, should, you should do this, you should do this. And it's like, well, I don't want to do this. Why don't I want to do this? Oh, because that's like actually not who I am. That doesn't align with my strengths and my gifts. So maybe I should actually be doing something different. So sometimes it gives us permission in that way, if that makes sense.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Yeah. And I think it gives us permission in so many parts of life of just who we are. There's a lot of areas that you can look to for guidance as it relates to business and how you really like what is the next best step. And I'll go back to the ones I just mentioned, like looking at the sun to see how you energize. If you're finding that you are just drained in the work, in the pushing, in the like kind of hustle culture of it all, and you happen to be a water sun, or you just, you happen to really connect with more like slow grounded energy because you're a Taurus sun or something like that, you can give yourself permission to say, okay, like pushing isn't necessarily the vibe for me. It's more of a slow, deliberate energy source. So when I say like the energy to just keep going, that sun is a great place to look. Another interesting place in the birth chart to work with as it relates to business is Mercury. Mercury is how you learn and how you communicate. And so if you're someone, say you're going to do a teacher training or you're going to lead a teacher training and you learn a lot about your Mercury, your communication style, you can learn the positive, the light, and the shadow side of that. Okay. So my Mercury's in Cancer. So I love to communicate by like being super lovey and nurturing and like sometimes I'd be like a little bit in people's faces and just like a mama. I mean, like literally like a mama bear. And I know that positive expression is to make someone feel really seen and be there to hold space for them. But the negative is that I can get a little overbearing. I can get almost like micromanaging for them. And so knowing that, understanding, okay, like this is how I show up in communication styles. I can really lean into the positive side of that. So for business, especially as it relates to yoga, Mercury is a cool place to look. And then I think understanding too, just what it is that ultimately your path forward is. Like, what's the end game for you? And if you're somebody who doesn't necessarily have a long-term vision, there's a very, very cool placement to look at in the birth chart called the North Node. It's an imaginary point on the moon. And it's ultimately, it tells you like the purpose of your life, sort of the energy that you're moving towards in this life. And it takes the whole life to get there. It's not like you're like, sweet, I have a Capricorn North Node. I've checked off all the boxes. My resume looks really good. Did it? No, it's an insatiable hunger. You're always striving for this. So when you know what sign your north node is and you understand like where you're headed, you can bump that up against a lot of the work that you're doing and check, is this an alignment? If my north node is in Sagittarius, I'm really working towards wisdom and freedom and life experiences. Maybe I'm going to travel a whole lot in my life. And is taking a desk job for a yoga mat brand, is that in alignment with my long-term vision? Maybe, maybe not. And so I think North Node is so helpful in your life's purpose and in your business.
Okay, cool. I know you mentioned Mercury. So my Mercury is in Capricorn and my North Node is in Pisces.
Ooh, yeah. Okay, let's talk about your North Node because Pisces is sweet. So Pisces is very spiritual, the most spiritual of all the signs. So, if you're, say, thinking about adding in another training for yourself or adding in a layer of your offerings or your teachings, you're going to ask yourself, is this in alignment with this goal to be more in touch with things that you can't see, with God, creator, whatever it is that you believe? Because Pisces is really moving towards that sort of magic of life. And so does that mean that like every step you take has to be wildly spiritual? No. But ultimately, the more in tune that you become with intuition, like we were talking earlier, and those connections to things that just we don't always see, is going to help you on your path for sure. Pisces is tough because it's being that spiritual and being that sort of sensitive, it's very watery, can feel like a lot too. That's a lot of emotion. And so it's also checking yourself and saying like, okay, how can I stay grounded as well as I move into these more philosophical ideas, as I move more into these really sort of sensitive and real space holding practices. What can I do to keep myself grounded? And then you see your Mars is in Capricorn, so you're like me.
Yeah.
You're motivated to go and do the things. I think honestly, like having a podcast, you have to be flipping motivated.
Oh my God, having a business.
Also that. And there is like a self-starter element to Mars and Capricorn because you just know that like, if no one's telling you what to do, you have to find that motivation from within.
Yeah. Yeah. This is so awesome. I just love this as you're talking. I'm like, oh, I need to I've had somebody pulled my daughter's birth chart and same with my husband and stuff, but I'm like, oh, I need to pull these again. And like, I really like how this website has laid everything out in a really like friendly, easy to consume way for somebody who's got a very basic understanding of this. But when we bring it back to business, I feel like it's also cool to like, this is something that you could have people that you work with do, so you can understand a bit more about them. Like that's something that I've always liked about, Myers-Briggs, Enneagram, human design, like understanding that about people that you work with, I feel like can just help you navigate, different personalities and how you interact with them. And especially as like a CEO or a boss where you're the person who kind of sets the standards for people. You can understand who you're working with and what they're like and what's going to motivate them and how they work best. I feel like you can create a really great work environment and also just choose people that you're going to work well with.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I do a lot of workshops for for teams in that, just like you're describing, where it's like, okay, Susan is a Cancer, so she's a little bit more emotional and like sensitive than say this Capricorn, and it's like helpful to understand and give each other validation and hold space and just a little bit more empathy for who these people are at their core. And then also, we speak to, okay, there's a positive and there's a shadow to every single piece of your chart, and you get to choose how you show up for that. You get to choose, am I that like wildly nurturing, amazing mama bear that I like to think I am? Or am I that like overbearing, sensitive, a little bit emotional, hormonal person? Yep, both sometimes, but I can choose to embody that positive. So knowing that about your team members, oh my gosh, it's so helpful.
Yeah, for sure. No, I love that. I think that that's really cool. I worked in corporate many, many years ago, like well over a decade ago at this point. Actually, not quite. I guess I stopped in like 2013, so almost a decade at this point. And we did Myers-Briggs. And I remember my boss was kind of a little bit like a Michael Scott.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Funny.
Like great human, very lovely person, but
Sure.
like a little bit of like Michael Scott if Michael Scott was a woman. Um, and when we did our Myers-Briggs and she was talking about her chart, I was like, this makes so much sense, like
Yeah.
how you are. And I feel like then I could approach these like Michael Scott type tendencies from a place of empathy and compassion instead
Yeah.
of like just annoyance.
Yeah, I agree. And you know what's really cool, Amanda, is when you start to look at all of them, you get your Enneagram and you get your Myers-Briggs and you get your chart, you get your human design. They're all consistent. They all say the same thing. It's so wild how that happens.
No, 100%. I feel like so much of what you've said so far from my birth chart, I'm like, oh, that came up with like my human design. Oh, that came up with my
Yeah.
Enneagram. That comes up in my Myers-Briggs, which is really cool. And so we've talked about quite a few things. We talked about self-care being sun, moon, and Mercury, and Mars, and then looking at Mercury and North Node for business. Is there anything else we can look at in our charts to kind of help us, you know, understand where we should go with our business, help give ourselves more compassion within our businesses, that type of thing?
There's so much. And I always suggest to people that are excited about this is to just study your own chart. Get it, if you can get a reading that first time, it's helpful to have someone explain it to you, but just study your own chart and understand, like pick one piece of the chart to really learn about yourself. How can I step into that positive vibration of that particular placement? What does it mean? And go from there. But the chart again it doesn't change and it brings you back to who you are. And as your business and as life and as partners and family members and all those things change, you and who you are at your core doesn't. And so I think it's just this like helpful reminder. It's funny because I feel like I work in a spiritual space where I'm a teacher. You're a teacher. We are telling people all the time, giving advice, giving ideas, but ultimately it's what the right choices are for a lot of these things. And I think that birth chart just gives you that extra like pat on the butt, like, yeah, you got this, you know what you're doing, you have the answers from within, and you don't need a guru or someone else to tell you what to do.
Hey, yoga teacher. We're just taking a quick break from the podcast to talk a little bit about Offering Tree. Now, if you've been listening for a while, then you know that I really love Offering Tree. And I don't just say that. I truly, truly mean it. This is a platform that was designed for yoga teachers by yoga teachers. They have your best interest in mind, and they've really created a platform that makes using technology and software so much easier. But don't just take my word for it. I want to share a few testimonials from some happy clients who are already using Offering Tree. The first one comes from Janet, who's a yoga and meditation teacher. And she shared, I was very much drawn to Offering Tree because I'd been tipped off about it by another yoga teacher friend. And I was like, oh, this looks clean and clear. And it's super easy to navigate the back end of it. And that was really important to me. And so that was what won me over. Janet is bang on with this. Offering Tree is seriously so easy to use. It's really simple to create a clean looking website and to set up all the back end things like classes, payment plans, memberships, courses, on-demand video, and so much more. Jennifer adds to this by saying, I was using another platform for scheduling, for payments and everything, but it's a little bit more cut and dry with Offering Tree, which I like. I didn't need to have all kinds of fancy plugins and all these different things. I just wanted simple. I didn't want someone to have to click through several drop-down screens to book something with me. So if you want to check out Offering Tree, head on over to offeringtree.com/MBOM. You can try the platform for free, or if you decide to sign up, you can get 50% off the first 3 months or 15% off a year. Once again, that's offeringtree.com/MBOM. All right, now back to the episode. I think that's been like discovering all of this for myself. That's been the biggest thing. And, I really try to kind of just head down, stay in my own lane, like trust my intuition. But sometimes it's hard when I go on social media and there's like, oh, you should do this to make 6 figures. And oh, you should do this to have like a profitable course launch. And oh, you should do this to have a successful business. And it's like, oh my gosh, like there's so many things, like, what do I do? And I just feel like when I actually tune in to like, who I am and stop taking the advice from all the other people and noise, it's so helpful. And I feel like this is just like, understanding this stuff about yourself is very reaffirming.
It feels so good to see yourself and know like, I'm doing it. I'm doing it.
Yeah, for sure. So one other thing I want to ask you about is in terms of obviously we have, kind of our seasons. So like kind of the third week of January hits and I'm like, okay, Aquarian season's here. It's my
Oh, yeah.
time. And then there's also when it comes to where like the planets are, like there's, full moon in whatever, Scorpio, full moon in Taurus, and the different things that those mean. So how did those kind of impact our chart and then in turn, our self-care, our businesses?
hmm So this is a little bit more like complicated layer of astrology. And like you were saying, sometimes it's like it gets a little overwhelming, but what you can do, what you can know about what's happening in the sky is that you are made up of all 12 signs. When you get your chart pulled, you're going to see all of the signs. And in them, in each sign is in some sort of house. So let me pull it back a little bit. The planets are the players on the stage. They're the actors. Okay. Your sun is this bright and shiny actor. The costume that it wears is the sign that it's in. So the sun is wearing this Aquarius costume. It's bright and shiny and wearing it in this way that like helps people, loves to learn. Okay. Then the house that it's in is the area of your life where it's impacted the most. Okay. That's the houses is the area of your life. So this could be, say it's in your second house. That's where you make money. Okay. You're bright and shiny in this curious and like humanitarian way. And it really shows up in how you make money. That's what the houses are. So you have 12 houses and they all represent a different part of your life. What's happening in the sky at any given time has some impact on a house, one of the houses. So let's say, I don't know what the next full moon, I think it's Sag, I can't remember. Full moon in Sagittarius. So if you're like, oh, well, where is Sagittarius in my chart? What house is Sagittarius in my chart? Oh, Sagittarius is in my fourth house of home life foundation. Okay. Well, full moons are all about release. They're all about letting go. They're like evaluating, saying like, what can I purge? What can I get rid of? And if it's hitting your fourth house, what can I release in my house that's holding up space, that's cluttering, that's making me feel like overwhelmed? So that's how you use what's happening in the sky to personalize in your chart in a fast and kind of easy way. Full moons, again, are always about a release. New moons are about intention setting. And then what was the other one you asked about?
Like the time of year. So when it's like,
oh, right. Sun. So when the sun changes signs, it's not wildly personalized. That's more of like collective energy. So when right now we just moved into Gemini season, there is like a speeding up. And you see that. I mean, you literally see these things play out in the world. The speeding up of activities. We're all of a sudden getting, excited to like add in our summer activities and get a little bit more social. We're coming out of Taurus season where we were cleaning our house, we were doing our spring cleaning, we were like getting kind of comfy, cozy, but we're like, it's summer, ready, let's go. And so you see these progressions and they affect us on more of a collective level. If you really are like, wow, I love this, I'd love to really mold my self-care around what's happening in the sky right at any given time, I would look to the moon. What sign is the moon in? The moon changes signs every 2 to 3 days. So that changes more frequently, but you can see like, okay, it's in Pisces. I'm going to slow down right now. Oh, now it's in Aries. I'm going to start a new project. You get to really personalize it to your life. So it's a little bit more complicated, but once you get the hang of it, and again, once you know your houses and you know what signs are in what houses, you just have that on your phone, you can pull it up and see like, oh, fifth house. Okay, what is fifth house again? Oh, creativity, children. Cool. I'm going to see how this is impacting my kids right now. They're going crazy.
cool. Yeah, that's really awesome. I actually just recently bought a it's called like a moon journal. And
Oh
so
yeah.
it was really interesting because I got it kind of in between the new moon and the full moon in Taurus or like during Taurus season, I guess. I
Yep.
don't know if I'm saying that correctly.
Mm-hmm.
And it was interesting because at the beginning of April, my husband and I had sat down and we'd been like, okay, we need to set up a budget and we're going to keep track of like all of our spending for the month of May. And we're going to like write it on a whiteboard. So it's like we have to look at it every day so that like it's not just going on our credit card and we're just like paying it off at the end of the month. And then I was sitting down working on my moon journal and it was like, oh, like setting a budget this time of year is like a really good thing to do. And I
Yeah.
was like, what?
Taurus is all about, about tangible thing, money and how we make money and the things that we can buy with money. Taurus is really rooted in that. So that's a great time to do that. That's so perfect. That's great.
Yeah. It's funny too, because I haven't sat down with it in a couple of days. Well, like a week or so. And you were just talking about like, oh, it's like Gemini season. We're excited about traveling. And just yesterday, we're like, where are we going to travel to soon? We've been like waiting for our baby's passport. It's finally going to be here soon. We're like, where should we go? We need to go do some things. There's like all these trips we want to take and stuff like that. And for me, this really just came from like I'm done my fourth trimester of postpartum now. And my own cycle hasn't returned yet, but I feel like I'm kind of ready to be like cycling in some way, like a little bit more feminine energy. And I'm like, okay, well, until my body's ready for that point in time, I just really want something that kind of connects me with more of like a cyclical rhythm instead of just doing the same thing constantly. Because I mean, because you're pregnant, it's like you go through these like massive physical, mental, emotional changes when you're in pregnancy. And I feel like I'm kind of just past that. So yeah, it's been really cool. I just started doing it, but it's really cool so far.
That the cycles of the moon, that moon journal that's a really, if you're not someone who is cycling for whatever reason, to have just to follow what the natural cycles of the moon are, that like early stage, starting out, things gather energy. You're at that peak energy at the full moon, and then it starts to wind down and you reevaluate and you start again. And just following that moon cycle is super cool. It like, yeah, if you want to get really geeky and when you do get your cycle back, like seeing where it falls with the moon, that's wild. Oh man, there's so much cool overlap. We're so in sync with a lot of this stuff when we don't even realize. One more fun fact, Amanda, if you're really curious, your child's moon is how they view you, which is awesome to know. So if you're like, okay, how can I show up as a positive expression for how my child views me? You see what sign their moon is in.
Okay, cool. I'm going to check that after because somebody gave me her birth chart like one of the first things when I was like, oh, Louise was born February 10th at whatever time in the morning and stuff. And they were like, I pulled her chart, but I was like, I'd given birth like 48 hours prior.
So sweet of your friend. Cool, I gotta stop doing. I do this to friends too, like 2 minutes after their children have been born. Like, here's their chart. Like,
it's amazing. I was really grateful. I think, because you've had babies, it's like, you're just not in the space to fully digest this information.
Yeah. So. Yeah, you'll have to pull it out. Look at her moon. And again, that's how she views you.
Okay, cool. Awesome. Yeah. Thank you for all of this. This has been really awesome. One final question for you. Do you have any top business tips, top business lessons that you've learned through your own career as a yoga teacher, as a yoga entrepreneur that you want to share with listeners today?
Yeah, I do. One of my, kind of the always tried and true for me is that of collaboration, and collaboration with people that you fangirl, if you will, people that you really admire, and just surrounding yourself with strong entrepreneurs, strong people that show you what's possible, because it's contagious and it rubs off. And for the most part, there's enough space for all of us out there. And the more that we can help each other and cheerlead each other, the more abundance spreads around. So I'm such a fan of promoting other friends and non-friends and meeting new people and collaborating and doing things like this. Like, this is the best. And it's really brought me the most business, more than anything else.
Cool. I love that. That's a really amazing tip. And I'm a big fan of that too. Collaboration over competition is one of the things that I've always been a fan of. And I just feel like there's so many people in this world who are interested in our services that we don't have to, fight over people or act like people are our competition, because we're all different. We're all unique, as we've been talking about today, that I think there's really space for all of us to share our unique gifts and find our unique audience.
I agree.
Amazing. Well, I know you have lots on the go, lots to share with people. Can you tell people where they can go to find you, where they can work with you, where they can listen to your show, all that type of stuff?
Yeah, thanks so much, Amanda. This was so fun. And I love talking about this stuff. So thanks for the opportunity. You can find my podcast, Yoga Magic, and all the same places that you would listen to this. On that show, we chat all things self-care and self-discovery. And we speak to it through the lens of astrology, come up with tons of different ideas, things you can try on. And then you can follow me on Instagram. I'm at Ashley.Sondergaard. And in the show notes, we'll have a link for a free cosmic self-care mini course. If you want to learn your self-care style, see, how does the sun affect me individually, the moon, Mars, all those things. That's a free opportunity to just kind of learn a little bit more.
Awesome. And are you doing like readings with people and that type of thing now? Or are you starting to wind down from maternity leave?
Yeah, I am still doing, so I do birth chart readings, just 30-minute birth chart readings where we overlook the details of your chart. And then I do 1-hour cosmic self-care sessions where we look at your birth chart and then we build a self-care plan, a sustainable plan that works for you. And then I also do joint human design and birth chart readings with a friend who is a human design expert, and we see how they bump up together. So I'm doing them through June, and then we'll take a little pause over the summer and then pick back up in late August, early September.
Okay, awesome. And that's on your website if people are interested in that?
Yeah, it's all on the website. We do it all on Zoom, make it really easy. And again, it's super personalized. I would love to work with anyone that's just getting into it.
Okay, amazing. Well, we'll make sure there's links for all of that stuff in the show notes so people can go check that out. And yeah, thank you so much for your time today, Ashley. This has been really, really awesome. I feel like I've learned a lot and I'm excited to dive in more.
Oh my gosh, thank you. So much fun.
Thank you so much for tuning in for this episode of the podcast. To find links, notes, resources, and everything mentioned in today and all episodes of the show, you can head on over to mbomeyoga.com. You can find the podcast and myself on Facebook and social media at Mastering the Business of Yoga. And I would love for you to join the private Facebook community, Yoga Business Badasses. If you have any questions, comments, or feedback, please make sure you reach out to me at info@mbomeyoga.com. And last of all, if you enjoyed this episode of the show, please make sure you hit subscribe and leave a review for the podcast. It would mean the world. Thanks so much for listening, and I'll see you next week. Namaste.